T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey friends, welcome to the Launch Sequence podcast. We've got to stop meeting like this. Before we get started on today's podcast, I have brought on Sulyce, my friend, to talk about our CitizenCon expectations, some things you may or may not be expecting yourself, but we do have some hot takes here and there. I want to talk about 4.0 because shortly after recording this podcast, CIG once again dropped a news drop that was big news drop that we should have been able to catch, but we didn't. Star Citizen 4.0 is in Evocati testing. Now, this is while 3.24.2 is in PTU testing, and for those who are following this quite closely, those two things don't happen too often. So in this podcast, we weren't really sure if it was going to happen, but just a couple hours after, it did. So now we know they can test both at the same time, and it's looking more and more like 4.0 might actually go live this year. So we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll talk about that in the weeks and months following this show. But for now, let's talk about CitizenCon and what you can expect. Thanks for coming. Hey folks, welcome friends to another episode of the Launch Sequence podcast, your favorite little space place to come and talk about some space games and quite a bit of the time Star Citizen. I'm your host, Space Tomato, and today I've got good friend Sulyce, the host of the Beyond the Verse podcast, who has hosted me quite a few times, and I think I'll be jumping on with here shortly too. And
pretty soon,
yeah, we're going to be talking about both big time server meshing tests going on, and the CitizenCon details have been released. Really, what specifically is going to happen at that show? Obviously, it's not every detail, and that's why we have this show to talk about what we expect to happen with what we've seen. But between those two topics, I think there's a lot of really good stuff to discuss, and I wanted to bring on somebody who I know had the hot takes ready to go. So.
I will try. I'll try to control that for this for the next hour.
Oh no! Please don't. We need the hot takes. That's the entertaining part.
It is.
Yeah. So it should be a good show, you guys. This is our last show before CitizenCon, before Squadron 42 gets a proper reveal, and before possibly a lot of things change in terms of expectations for this game. And you'll actually be joining me on Citizen Central after the show, right? That same week. So we'll be able to come back and have a little retrospective on these expectations we set today.
Yeah, to see how right we were.
Yeah, be careful. But we're going to start out with some discussion surrounding server meshing. So we had a couple server meshing tests toward the beginning of this year just to get people caught up. Those were mainly, I think those were... Do you remember how high the player cap was for those?
So I know for the test Delta, which is not this last one, but about 2 weeks ago, that was a 4 to 500 ratio. So 4 servers to a 500 player cap. I don't remember. I don't remember what the previous ones were, but that's where they settled that the sweet spot was for the Delta test.
Yeah. They had gone up to 1,000, right? Ever since they restarted the test. Yeah, they've been going up to 1,000. I just don't remember how many it was way back in March, April time. But they've been getting progressively better over the last month or two, with the first tests being 1,000 and not really running that great, I think, and then another test being 1,000 and like basically not even working. But these latest tests, actually just yesterday or 2 days ago, not only did they hit 1,000 with some improvements, we also had that 500 level, but they bumped it up to 2,000 players per shard, which is 20 times what you would get in a shard in the live environment right now. This is not the end goal. This is not in any way where they plan on stopping. But what do you think of the progress they've been making so far?
Yeah, so my baseline is how the 1 to 100 ratio performs on the new builds. And so you can argue when it first goes live, servers are fresh. It's supposed to run very smooth. But for this last test, the test Echo from 2 days ago, when they first launched, it was the 1 to 100 ratio, and that was butter smooth for like the 30 minutes. So it didn't really allow much degradation. So I was really, really happy with that initial ratio, the initial performance. And then they did. They bumped it up to that 6 to 1,000. So 6 servers to 1,000. And it actually surprised everybody. It was performing at the 4 to 500 ratio level. It was great to see all the bodies in New Babbage, right, collectively bottleneck onto trains and try to get into elevators. It changed. Go ahead.
It's kind of funny because when you start a new server right now with just 100 players and you're running alongside like 5 or 6 other people to the train,
That's
and
right.
it's just peak Star Citizen experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess a lot of MMOs have situations like that, but I can't imagine what it's like when there's 1,000 players instead of just 100.
Yeah. Well, and it's 1,000 players jumping into 4 locations,
Right?
and that's huge because they're brand new servers. There's only 4 locations to jump into, so you've got 1,000 people. But that's, Keenan, that's nothing compared to the 2,000 cap that happened.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Incredible. So when I logged into the 2,000 first, let me just, I'll bluff the bottom line up front, right? It was PowerPoint Citizen, right? So 2,000 people in, it was choppy. It was like 2 frames per second, but we knew this. Everybody knew this.
We're used
If you
to
thought it
this.
was, that's right. Yeah. So if you thought it was going to be this awesome experience, like you've never played Star Citizen. So so it was like 1,800 people were logging in to the shard that I was on at the same time. There was 500 people getting into New Babbage, right? So like you can see like which server is being influxed, but there's 500 people. And by the time we all got in, I had like 5 people in my habitation. There was a line of like hundreds of people out the elevator. Like it was, it probably created more questions than we had going in the server meshing. But the 2,000 was impressive. It showed the potential and the excitement of what can be with server meshing. I think everybody walked away from that very excited that we were this close. We did server meshing. Now it's not optimized. It was miserable. You can't play the game in this way with 2,000. But once they backed it back down to 1,000, I think they're in a very decent place. Again, not optimized, but I think they're in a good place.
And there's obviously a lot of complications that come from when people are sorry, I just got distracted. There's a lot of optimizations that come from them putting it in a live server, and that kind of, there's a lot of questions there. It's not to say that whatever they're doing right now is going to translate perfectly over, but I don't mind if they were to just be like, hey, we've got 150 people in a shard. That's how we're launching server meshing into 4.0. For me, it's as long as they get 100%. The technology working and running. The fact that they're taking this time right now to just kind of push the technology and keep on testing it regardless of what their plans are for 4.0, because from what Benoit is saying, it sounds like they are right now testing things for essentially 4.1 or 4.2. Like they're kind of past what they have planned for 4.0, and they're just trying to get as much data as they can before they put this technology live. And I really appreciate that. I hope that they can, I guess, coming out and saying that we're good to go for 4.0 isn't really going to help anything. The people who think it might come already think it will. The people who don't already think it don't. It's not going to change very much. It'll be nice to see it, though, entering Evocati and to have this really start showing up.
Yeah. One of the things I really appreciated about this test is that Benoit was actually in the test chat. And right before they went live to 2,000, him, Waka, like a lot of the devs were like, we know it's going to break. Like, stand by, like, get ready for the disaster that's about to happen. They are doing this on purpose to break it. They want to see how it breaks. And if you've never done Evocati, PTU, test preview, it's not for the timid, right? Like, it's going to be a broken experience. And it did. But in your chat, there was a good comment that was just made. It was the fact that 2,000 were in the server and it didn't crash. Like 2,000 were in the server and it lasted, I think I was in there for about an hour and a half before I had to leave to pick up my kids from school. That's the victory. You can optimize. You can take time to optimize what that experience looks like and feels like. But if it's stable, right? If it's stable, then we're good to go. Yeah. You also said something about going like live. I think this is what's important about CitizenCon. And you're going to hear me say this a lot on this episode, but the minimum viable product. Like, what is 4.0's minimum viable product? They could theoretically do exactly what you said. I think they could get by with the 4 to 500 ratio. That 4 to 500 is nice. It was butter smooth. I think you could say server meshing is on. We've succeeded. Here's 4.0, knowing that it's static, knowing that it's not, with the floodgates open. I think the community would accept that as a win, in my opinion.
Here's the thing that I worry about there is that with static server meshing, they kind of have to decide what their maximum amount of people per server is, right? If everybody ended up showing up in the same place in the game. And since it's going to be both Pyro and Stanton on one shard, if they did, say, 5 servers across Pyro and Stanton, that could mean that people could all flood into Stanton and then go to one place in Stanton. And technically, you've got to still be able to cover that, and the game still runs there. I don't think it will really happen, but we know players. Like, we will figure out a way to test that and break it. That's just, it's how we are. And I wonder, like you said, like, what's the minimum viable situation that they want to be able to handle there? Because I do agree. I think the 500 players per 4 servers, I think you said. About 500 players, 4 servers seems like it works pretty well in one system. But what is that? What happens when that goes into 2 different systems? Especially because Pyro has more planets on it, but it has less landing zones, so less NPCs. Maybe like there's a lot to think about and consider. And something another person who we've both had some pretty long talks about, the Astro Historian, said on one of his streams recently was that he realized the servers aren't geographically bound. So you could have a planet in one system and a planet on another system in the same server with other servers in between them. So how can they do a bunch of load balancing with all these different servers in different places to make the environment work for whatever 4.0 is? And maybe they're still trying to figure that out. Maybe that's something they figure out during Evocati. Regardless, that's, like you said, a lot of questions. And we're going even beyond the technology right now, because God, it's such a big deal, folks. It was 6 years ago that they put server meshing on the screen, and they were like, this is where we want to get to. And we're finally actually testing it. It feels so good. But now we're starting to see the gameplay questions that come from it. Like you said, the habs were crowded. Elevators are crowded. Trains are crowded. And while that's happening just at the beginning of the server, what do you think they're going to have to do to make it so that like the game can support all these people together?
That's tough. I'm not a game developer. I would love to answer that, but that is such a complicated answer. You fast forward to a dynamic server meshing situation where an Idris is on its own server, right? These capital ships are on its own servers. How does that communicate? How does that interact with other servers? Like, it's such a brilliant question. But if you think about like the game Star Citizen itself, like the game loops, everything is based off of a queue. Everything. So when you call ATC to leave your hangar, can you imagine 2,000 people from New Babbage asking to leave the ATC at the same time?
Yeah.
Like, everything is queued. And so I don't know how they're going to solve that problem. That's actually my main question. Leaving that 2,000 player test is what does that even look like? Gamers will be gamers. You called it out, right? Like when we were in the test chat, everybody was like, party at New Babbage. Let's get on the lake in an 890 jump. And like everybody swarmed New Babbage. How's that? Like, it's going to happen when Pyro launches. Everybody meet in this one location. They're gonna have to solve it for it pretty quick.
And imagine. Sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
I was just gonna end by saying, like, I wonder how much grace the community is gonna give CIG. Like, knowing that when you first get into a brand new server, it's going to be gross. Give it time. Give it like 30 minutes to an hour for people to dissipate. It depends on how the community and how much grace they're willing to share.
And imagine when there's like a big name, far bigger than any Star Citizen name right now, that comes in and wants to stream the game and is putting on a big show, and they've got 5,000, 10,000 people, 20,000 people watching them live, and just 2% of those people want to jump into the game and come find them. Like, how crazy is it going to be a situation where the game has to account for that? This is why so many other games do instancing. And we know that CIG is starting to, with at least their personal hangars and probably with habs. But how much further do they go with that? Because the more they instance, the less they lose that vision of that shared universe But at the same time, a shared universe comes with a lot of complications we're finally starting to see when it comes to server meshing. And some people have been saying this for a long time, like, hey, you want to do this with server meshing, but who's to say it's going to work when you account for all the gameplay aspects of it? And this is where those questions start to come up for the actual environment being played.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's one of the things to look forward to at CitizenCon is they're going to have to address it.
Yep.
They're going to have to talk about it. Like, you saw server meshing, you saw 2,000 people in. Now let's address some of those concerns.
And it's good that they finally, that they were able to get to this point before they started talking about 1.0, because like you just said, now they've got something to actually point to as an example of where this is going to go. So this has been a period of rapid iteration and on a lot of communication, as PK is saying in the chat right now. This is... It's a bit indicative of parts of Star Citizen's development and the way that they kind of share information with what's going on, but also at the same time, it's quite different from other times when they don't tell us things. Generally, it's when things aren't working that they're telling us about it. But this has been what seems to be a string of victories in server meshing development, and a lot of feedback they've been sharing, basically retrospectives on every single test right after it happens on what they've learned, and as it goes on, what they're learning. What do you think players should take from this? Should they feel good about this going into 4.0 this year? Does it seem like we're on progress for that kind of thing, or should people still be a little skeptical about that?
I think it's because they listen to your podcast. That's what I think. This goes, the last time I was on your show, right? The last time I was on your show, when we talked about the communication strategy and what needs to change about it. They don't have a choice. This close getting into marketing and public relations. My first tinfoil hat comment for the day, but we're going to find out about Squadron 42. Probably going to get a release date. Probably going to get the schedule for next year. I think when you're this close to a release, when 4.0 launches, there's going to be a large marketing push. I think they have to refine their communication strategy. So what gamers should take from this, it's indicative that we're close to the finish line. Now, what that finish line is that minimal viable product that I'm trying to talk about. But we're so close to that I think they don't have a choice. They know that there's a lot of visibility, especially going into CitizenCon. There's a lot of questions. A lot of people are following up. And this is their chance to really get out in front of the narrative. I think it's them controlling the narrative, not in a negative way, not in a bad way, but I think if they get out and talk about the after action report for the test preview, test echo, the one that just happened, they get this narrative out there, they publish it, and they controlled the narrative. The metrics are important, but it also helps us, content creators, podcasters. It helps us talk about it with a lot more subject matter expertise, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's great. It needs to continue though, because it dips. It does this ebb and flow where we get this massive push of communication, and we're all happy, and it's CitizenCon. But then what happens in February and March of next year? It's just flatline. You're like, what the hell's happening this year? What?
So
where is everything?
Do you think that this, if they were having these sorts of moments with server meshing back in March, do you think the communication would have been the same, or do you think they're kind of hyping it up too because we're near CitizenCon?
No, I think it's the latter. I think it's the latter. They February, March earlier this year, they would have probably tested something and just let it go under the rug. Again, not malintent, but they have plenty of time to make adjustments and iterate. I don't think it's the main objective in February and March, but going into Q4, which is arguably one of the highest marketing quarters for gaming, they have to. They're forced to have this next level communication. But I think it ebbs and flows again going into next year. I think we're going to get a lot of information. We're going to get excited. Luminalia in December is going to happen. We're all giddy, and then February and March happens, and we're like, where was everything we promised?
It's going to be
they got to be consistent.
It's going to be interesting to see. Now, we're going to talk about this a lot. We're going to get to CitizenCon in a little bit, but it's going to be interesting to see if, by some means, this is not a prediction, this is not my expectations, but by some means they do say something like Squadron 42 is something we want to launch in April or May or something like that, then that whole first half of the next year would still have to be very in your face, very marketing heavy. Yes. And we kind of lose that quiet segment. Maybe not so much on the Squadron side. Maybe there's still plenty of reserve when it comes to the persistent universe development, but on the Squadron side, things are going to be pretty loud in that case. So I am interested in seeing if next year is a little bit different based on what they might be setting us up for.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. You can't really have two marketing pushes, in my opinion. So it's important for them to get 4.0 out by the end of the year. So hopefully by the end of December, we've got 4.0 in some shape, right? In some fashion. They could literally quiet the Star Citizen conversation up until Squadron 42's release. We have a lot to go into. We have a lot of Pyro, the game loops. Like, we would probably be satisfied as a community to have Pyro for the next quarter and not have anything new. Quite honestly, that gives them the ample opportunity to dive into Squadron 42. Whether there's going to be testing, whether there's going to be early access, I have no idea, no intel for that. But I do think you can't have one without the other. I think one has to like fall off. And I think Star Citizen, after releasing 4.0, can fall off. And then Squadron 42 should take off. And everything should be about Squadron 42.
I would be worried, because even as much as Pyro in 4.0, I won't say Pyro, 4.0 is bringing a decent amount of change to the game, from engineering, localized missions, the handyman contracts that they're now talking about, and probably other things that aren't quite on the release view yet. I still do think that 4.0 on its own won't be enough to keep people's excitement, given how long we've waited for it. Because this is the same thing that's going to happen with Squadron. It has been anticipated for so long that when it finally comes, it's not going to be as exciting, because reality is going to hit. Hey, there's still more to do here. Squadron, yeah, it's a released game when it comes out, but I don't think any game really can live up to the expectations that are set by 8 years of delays. So
that's very
I'm hopeful that they've got something good planned for 4.1 and 2. These are the types of things I think we'll hear about at CitizenCon. And I would hope that they don't just kind of fall off there. There's also the fact that when Squadron 42 comes out, Star Citizen needs to be in a good place. It needs to be in a place that can accept the people who are going to try Squadron 42 and then want to try Star Citizen, because that's going to be the biggest marketing boost to Star Citizen it's ever had. And if it's not ready, which thank God server meshing is starting to look like it might be, but if it's not ready, that's going to be a big miss.
Yeah, and I think that last point is kind of what I'm leaning on. It's almost as if they would need to go into, this is the wrong use of the term, but it's almost as if 4.0 would need to go into like a polishing phase. Like, if to that point, if they need a solid Star Citizen experience, you wouldn't really introduce anything crazy. You would make sure what exists actually works, right? With like server meshing, game loops, everything. You want that, like you said, in a good place. Squadron 42 goes live. You've got the top tier content creators getting in there, IGN reviews, you get all of that attention. You're right. Everybody's going to flock to Star Citizen. And if they're still building brand new material and it's like what we have right now in the PTU, that's not a good place. That's going to be a turnoff for a lot of those gamers. So I think they're in an interesting predicament where I agree. They're not going to make anybody happy by holding a status quo, but I also think they need it because they need a stable platform.
And the game needs to be better at communicating. Like, it takes so long to understand what's going on in this game when you first join in. They need to be able to have some NPCs that can talk to you, or at least like inform you of something, some kind of pop-up tutorials every once in a while in certain places that let you know what the heck's going on. They've got the new tips, which are kind of helping, but something a little more substantial than that. Maybe like when you open your Mobiglass for the first time, something that just highlights the different parts of it for you. And definitely, in my opinion, mission givers need to make a comeback. And I really hope that's something that they're focusing on shortly after server meshing, because mission givers are a staple of MMOs. It's what everybody expects. Even if it's just somebody telling you to go do a fetch quest, getting a contract from an actual person is going to heighten the experience so much more than I think just looking at a list on your Mobiglass. And those little supportive features, I think, are things they're going to want to get in the first few patches after server meshing is stabilized for the normies to come in.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. There's an expectation of an MMO community that Star Citizen is just not there yet. right? So that's interesting. That's one of the things I looked forward to with distribution centers is they were supposed to be quest hubs, and they're not there yet, right? Like
Yeah.
they're not really quest hubs,
Yeah. We
not,
don't even
not
have
yet.
the underground segment. They're like, these are supposed to be building ground facilities that offer you a bite-sized piece of all the gameplay Star Citizen has to offer, and then you get there and it's like, okay, carry this box and shoot this person. Like, where's the mining? Where's the salvage? Where's
Yep.
I guess there's some investigation stuff, but it's not quite what it was supposed to be. And we saw underground facilities some two years ago now.
Mhm.
We
Yep.
need something better at those locations for sure. There's a lot of stuff. I think that's one of those things that really was hurt. Like the turbulent acquisition was great, but I think
Mhm.
those underground facilities and the distribution centers really struggled to get through that acquisition, and the difference in planning and building of those locations that was happening between the two companies that had to meld together. And
Yeah.
it does really seem like the production on those has slowed down and showed signs of just kind of being there for later, which is how a lot of the stuff they release is. But it seemed like they had more planned for that in the short term that they've had to put aside and figure out some other things now.
Sure. Is this one of those you think they do you think it's neglected? Not again with not malintent, but do you think they push it off to the side to focus on server meshing and these other high deliverables? Or do you think it's still being worked on? We just don't have the visibility on it like we do with server meshing.
I don't know. They
Yeah.
they very commonly do the whole, we're going to launch this into the PU. It's a tier 0 or a tier 1 implementation. Okay, it works. Bare minimum, it works. Let's move on to the next thing. And then we'll come back to this when we reach some form of a beta kind of phase. But at the same time, these were very, very less than what they were kind of, it seemed like they were on the way towards. And the Montreal team has done a pretty good job of delivering more than just the bare minimum when they do that.
Mm.
I'm not, yeah, I feel like there's something missing from there that we didn't really get to hear about. And it might be because that same team also is meant to be working on building interiors. We don't really know what's going on there, if they are or are not working on it. They're also meant to be working on new star systems. So probably this is the same group that might be focusing on Nyx or something beyond that. And also Squadron 42 sounds like it has taken more work over the last year to year and a half than was expected. And it's continued to pull devs back from the PU work that people kind of thought they would be doing. And they even communicated kind of they would be doing more of. So as with many of these things that happen, I think it's the unpredictability of the game's development, and specifically this game's development, that have caused that to slow down. But I would hope that when we get to the CitizenCon stuff and we talked about 1.0 and sort of their plans going forward, they will come back and talk about where these locations are supposed to go. Because as of right now, a lot of people jump in and they think this is it. This is what it's going to be. They'll polish it up, but this is the Star Citizen experience. And I don't think that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be either surprised or upset at that 1.0 conversation.
Oh,
right?
I think we'll all be upset to some extent. It's hard not to be when you've got an idea for a game in your head and then they have to be like, okay, here's what we can really do.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Let's talk about CitizenCon though. So the actual schedule with all the panels was released this week, and it's usually about a week to a week and a half before CitizenCon, so they're right on schedule. And it's got a lot on it. It's been split into 2 days. We're going to go over this first day now, and then we'll give you guys a little chance for an intermission, and we'll do our second day. But the first day is called The Universe We Create. And let's start with that. It's called The Universe We Create, and looking at the panels that we have, Brave New World, A Social Universe, Dress to Kill, Beyond Pyro, do those kind of like fit into a category altogether, would you say?
Yeah, I take the titles like the universe we create as like being CIG, the universe that CIG has owned and created. What their plan of action is, not to get ahead of ourselves, but day 2's the Destiny U Forge. So I think the category I would say is like, what is the finalization or maybe like the next iteration of what CIG will be working on. So if you look at the different titles here, you got introducing Genesis, like a new tech. You got what they're doing with social and org play, which I can't wait to get into. armor, weapons, next systems. So like you've got, I think it's everything that they're doing and what we can expect post Pyro, or maybe even to your point, the 4.1, 4.2. So I think it's this beyond maybe this year, what 2025 and beyond, in my opinion.
Yeah. We're going to get to the Beyond Pyro panel, but one thing that I really do like that they point out there is, rather, they don't really point it out, but it's acknowledged that they are now packaging Stanton and Pyro as the existing game. Because for the longest time, the status quo was, oh, they're going to focus on Pyro. They're going to talk about Pyro. It's all Pyro. Everything's Pyro. But like every CitizenCon, they talk about things in Stanton too. It's just that you don't mention Stanton by name because it's part of the game. And so now with this CitizenCon, it seems we're stepping into this new phase where both Stanton and Pyro are part of the game. They're not going to be talked about as separately, which means that there's a new system or maybe multiple new systems that start to come into that conversation as the thing that they talk about as the next sort of area they move to. But we'll get to that. Yeah. Let's talk about Brave New Worlds. Well, did you have something to say about that?
I was just going to say, just to add on just a little bit more to that. Yeah. It's also kind of it's also like in past tense. Again, not a tinfoil hat comment, but it's almost as if they're going to be talking about, like in CitizenCon, to your point, Stanton Pyro as like the package it's been. Like I think that they're really trying to pivot this CitizenCon into the future. So at the time, Saturday rolls around and we're having these conversations, it's like, yeah, Stan and Pyro. Yeah, that's the package. That is the Star Citizen experience. And that makes me think that 4.0 and Evocati is absolutely going to be a thing, either before CitizenCon or on CitizenCon. But the way they are wrapping this up is to say, yeah, it's there. It exists. The Stan and Pyro package exists. Let's talk about what's next. It's almost past tense.
I would not be surprised if 4.0 went to Evocati at CitizenCon.
Yeah.
Because they will find, and that's interesting because I have assumed there would be a 3.24.3 patch for IAE. I just can't see them going live with 4.0 before IAE. That's very risky.
It is.
It also takes away, I think, some of the flair and attention from the in-game part of IAE. Yeah. So I'm wondering if maybe they would do Evocati 4.0 and then just, can they do PTU and Evocati on two different patches? I'm not really sure if they've done that before. If they could do a 324.3 PTU while 4.0 is on Evo.
I've never seen it, or I don't recall, but that is an interesting question. Like it's almost I think that's a good point. Like I think you would put 4.0 into Evocati, maybe even PTU, but don't touch live, because IAE could be the last celebration. It could be themed as like this last, 3 dots or the 3 chapter celebration. And then you can go live to 4.0 in December during Luminalia. I think that's a good cadence.
That would be interesting if they were able to. I do think that they will still aim for Open PTU 4.0. I don't know if it'll get live, but it would be cool if they were able to do live early December and then drop a patching up patch before they go on Christmas break. We'll have to see.
Agreed.
Let's talk about Brave New World.
Let's get it.
This is their Planet Tech panel from what we're seeing of the description, introducing Genesis, the innovative suite of technologies and processes within Star Engine that breathe new life into truly immersive worlds, achieving the fidelity and scale required to fill an entire universe. So this is all about, well, actually, why don't you explain? What do you think of this?
I wish you would have done that, because I don't freaking know. If you go back to last CitizenCon, this is the same segment where they released the future of gaming. That video that went viral, that all the top tier content creators reviewed and watched, and it was beautiful. It was seamless. It was very in the face of Starfield. Where it's like no load screens, completely seamless. But it was such a great video. I think they emulate the same experience. There's going to be a video or something here that shows Maelstrom. There's got to be some introductions to, I know base building is more day 2, but what does living in this new tech actually feel like? It's one thing to talk about 2,000 people in a server, right? Or in a shard, that's fine. But I think they're gonna have to get into the actual player experience and how the tech influences or impacts the day-to-day logging in for 30 minutes and logging out. What is the tech that you're going to feel for that 30 minutes? but I have no clue. And I watch notes. Like I watch patch notes. I watch weekly, monthly reports. Like I do my deep diving. And this is the first time I'm truly reading anything about a tech called Genesis. Um, so I have no idea what this is going to be about. I'm excited about it. This is theoretically a tech project, not a game project, in my opinion. Like they're absolutely building tech that we just get to play in. So I'm very curious what all this entails that we haven't already experienced.
Yeah, Genesis is definitely new. I guess that's why they're introducing it.
Yeah, right.
What you just said about it being a tech project is interesting. It mirrors what somebody said during the recent announcement of Halo, 343 Studios changing the Halo Studios and taking the Unreal Engine. One of the women who were presenting said, we spent a lot of time feeling like we were straddling a game studio and a tech studio as we built our engine. And so we're switching over to Unreal Engine so we don't have to spend as much time on that. And it's really indicative of just how much CIG has been a tech company up until kind of now. Like they're just starting to get more into building out games as Squadron becomes more finalized and some of those systems come into Star Citizen. It starts to feel more like there's a game underneath all of these different systems and stuff. But yeah, this is a tech presentation, I think. Yeah. Just like you said, this is very Star Engine focused. Planet Tech V5, this is their chance to prove that they can build out star system after star system with different details and different designs quickly. And I think it's going to be an important moment for them to make that clear, because now we have a second star system. The question is no longer, can you do server meshing with another star system? The question is, okay, how many star systems can we get? Because a lot of people are still kind of like, hey, you guys promised 100 star systems, which I don't think that's ever happening. Maybe that happens, but that doesn't seem very likely with the way that they do star systems now. For reference for everybody, when they said that, the way that they were doing planets was more like what you'd see from Star Wars Outlaws or Starfield. They changed the model of the game from when they said 100 systems. They said 100 systems back in like 2014. The way the game is actually made changed in 2015. So it's outdated information, but people still go by that. And I think they need to address that and what their plans are.
Yeah, you know what I would love to see in this tech? Like, I want to see what their vision is. And just like, again, the video I referenced about last year, you saw alien life, the space whales, the cows, like you saw everything. I want to see what their vision is. And I actually want to see it like in the video on what it means to populate the world. Right, populate these planets. Like I want to see patrols. I want to see what an underground facility actually looks like, what their intent or vision is. Instead of having just the Merrics and Copians and like one central location on Microtech, like it'd be nice to see what their vision is for Animals on Yella in Crusader. Yeah. I would love to see what living in Star Citizen looks like with this new tech, because I think that's what we don't have right now. Is kind of a barren. We have barren planets that are just now being populated, and it's with like 2 or 3 aliens. Show me a complete diverse ecosystem. I would love to see that in this tech.
I agree there. I think the ecosystem and the way that fauna interacts and how the economy and game loop follows both fauna and harvestables and minables from how they spawn to how they are built into the way the game works, from selling to crafting to buying to trading, and then how they repopulate themselves dynamically, or at least out of view, so it seems a little bit more believable. Now we finally have fauna in the game, but how does that really factor into your everyday life? And I think those kinds of points also factor into this second panel we're getting, a social universe. And this one reads, "It's the people you meet and the bonds you form that truly bring the verse to life. Dive into how we're evolving social features to maximize your adventures, from personal one-on-one conversations to interactions, to massive gatherings with hundreds and even thousands of players." So this has some underlying references to server meshing for sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask what you think of this panel, but just relating to what we were just talking about, do you think that this is solely focused on player-to-player interactions as it's saying here? Or do you think it could also reference things like what you're talking about with NPCs and the way that the world works?
It's the latter. Yeah, it's the latter. I think you can iterate or ideate and have some pretty crazy ideas on way a human to human interacts, a human gamer and a human gamer interacts. But there's only so much you can do. There's only so much VoIP can bring to the table. I think this is exactly the latter. I think this is, what does it mean to walk around Area 18 and see your org's messaging, or to see an actual in-game experience flash on a screen, or what it means to, like, you already have to go to a kiosk, right, wrong, or indifferent. I know people are have their emotions about that, but
Oh boy.
having to go to your kiosk to get your inventory. But like, imagine getting your messaging. Imagine going to a kiosk to get your mission, rather than having it only on like a Moby Glass. But I think this is how the game talks to you.
I would
It's
love
Go
like a
ahead.
contract board at space stations for the
100%.
local missions.
Exactly what I had in mind. Like, if you go to New World, the game New World, they've got in every town, they've got that, exactly that. It's a contract board or a mission board. You walk up and you pull off a sheet of paper and it has your mission. Like, give me some like interaction with the world. And I think that's what this is, a social universe. I think that's what this is. It's how do the thousands of gamers interact with the game, as opposed to being like spoon sped. Wow.
Foon
Spoon
sped.
fed. That's a new one. Spoon fed, like on your Moby Glass. I think their goal is to get you out of that Moby Glass and getting your intel and getting your direction. One of my favorite things to do whenever I get into the game is turn off everything. And what would I do in real life? I look at the airport signage, right? If I'm in Area 18, I look at signs. Like, how do I get to a certain location? Well, don't open up your map. Look at the airport signage. Like, there's signs everywhere that says this way to the cafe or this way. I just think more of that, inundate us with in-game direction. I think that's what this is.
Yeah, I think you could see some of that here, definitely. And you make a good point, because in 4.0, they're introducing localized missions. And so imagine if you were in Pyro and you were at an outpost and you just landed there, you were selling off some stuff, but you decided, hey, I'd like to run some handyman missions, maybe do some repairs. And then you go and check your repairs mission contract and you realize somebody from 20 million kilometers on the other side of the system took that mission that they're not going to be able to complete for like 10 minutes. Like, there has to be some localized restrictions to what you can take and not take. And for that to happen, I think limiting where it pops up, they could limit it still on your Moby Glass to popping up like that. But I think having a central location in the little town and frontier settlements like that would be really add to the experience of feeling like you are on the fringes and you're not using technology to get these roles exactly. You're using whatever means they have in that area.
I love that. And it also forces the social interaction between players too. Because if I'm at a board and I see your character come up next to me and we're looking at the same mission, hey man, you want to partner up? You want to party up and do this?
I was totally assuming you're gonna be like, I'm gonna click all these buttons and get them all before you can find them. They're mine.
Well, missions. There's that too. So we know who the salty gamer is over here.
So it's definitely it's also giving feels, like you said, of org interactions, which is, I think, is incredibly important because this is a multiplayer game. And up until now, the best way to play this game, that's wrong. It's not true. It's not the best way to play the game. But one of the best ways to both learn this game, get involved, and just understand how it works is to get in with the group. And they've already made it a precedent to talk to and find orgs. That's the easiest way to find a group, whether it's through going to their Discord server, finding them on the website, seeing somebody's video on YouTube, watching a stream about it. You enter an org, and then you get into game, and there's nothing different about the game. Nothing. There's no org list. You can't see your chat with your org. You can't know who's in your org. You could be shooting at somebody and then find out later that you're both on the same team. And that's got to change, especially when we're going to start to have 500 players in a single instance. Because when it's 100 players, not as common. But you are going to start running into random people from your org when server meshing starts working. And we got to have tools for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll go as far to say is just the org play itself is broken, from the Xenothreat raids to jump town to the new blockade runner, it's damn near impossible, right? Like even now with just a small group of like 20 members from Sole Provision, I'm sure you see it in the garden as well. Just 20 people trying to go after a mission, and the gamer tags aren't above the characters. Like
Yeah.
that's low hanging fruit. Like, let me know who's in front of me. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be like, this is Sulyce, but like, give me a blue icon, like highlight do something.
Yeah.
Current day military technology, I can do a heat signature and put an image around a heat signature and say, all right, that's a friendly, right? It's Blue Force.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
like, so I'm like, we have it now. So 2954, 900 years in the future, give me some tech, right? So I think org play, it's damn near impossible. But I think during this segment, they should absolutely tap into that. We have got massive orgs. We all have the desire to do these massive global events. Like, we're here for it. But when you get into it and realize it's very hard to communicate, like you have to be in a Discord channel to communicate. VoIP sucks.
Yep.
It's the push to talk is miserable. They need to find out a better way to do this in-house rather than using a third party like Discord.
Yeah, absolutely. That also helps with things like data logging and transferring. It allows you to talk on local, like if you can naturally by default only talk into your ship, and then when you press a button, it talks to your whole party. These kinds of things change a lot of the aspects that make it hard to use a voice channel in a big group of people in a Discord server, as opposed to, limited by proximity. Also, when they mention personal one-to-one interactions, what do you think that might be getting at?
I think it's homage to what you and I have been talking about with like player like NPC interaction. I think it's the next level, the refinement of what those conversations look like. It doesn't live in the Moby Glass. It doesn't like, what does that conversation look like when you're sitting down with Vaughn? Is it like how is that one-on-one interaction? I don't know if this necessarily ties into like how Sulyce and Space Tomato interacts in the game. I think this is more about how we interact with the universe itself, and I think we're going to see something probably groundbreaking. In my opinion, we've seen a lot of user interface changes, the HUDs, the F key manipulation, and how to assign short gestures. I think we're going to see something pretty exciting. But I think it's when you're sitting down across from Vaughn and having that personal interaction of my gaming instance and that NPC. That's what I think it is.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good call. I didn't think of that. I was thinking things like being able to maybe trade stuff between players in person, loaning things to other players, possibly setting up some kind of thing where you have to make regular payments to a player, just things that allow for more of that sort of corporation kind of building and Love it. The ability to pay somebody for doing commodity transfers for you without having to be there and constantly hit the button. But also, we've seen some talk of the markers. We've seen some changes with the markers too going on, where like you have to scan now to see a player's name instead of just getting it by default. Maybe this also means like FPS scanning other players and learning information about them instead of just them showing up as a red because they have a crime stat, stuff like that. Might also help to build interactions. But yeah, ultimately there's a lot of ways this one could go. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, you said trading between players, and I'm like, please don't make us go to a kiosk to trade between players. Like, come on.
Technically, we can do that.
True.
You can't really put it in escrow, but you can just like leave it in your hangar and have somebody pick it up.
Right.
So we're gonna. There's the cosplay competition as well. 2954 cosplay competition by Toby. Fan favorite event returns, where Star Citizen enthusiasts from around the verse showcase their most impressive game-inspired looks. Should be a fun time, but not really that gameplay focused. So we're gonna skip over that one. And the next, okay, go ahead. He's got a passion.
No, I'm just curious
for it.
No, I just have a quick question. Like, have you ever cosplayed, and if so, who and what have you cosplayed?
Well, I was Frankenstein's monster on Halloween when I was about 9 years old, and I think I pulled that off pretty well.
Nice.
Pretty good at that. No, I haven't really done any cosplaying as an adult, like literally outside of just dressing up for Halloween, which I don't know if that even is considered the same thing.
Same concept.
I really want to do at some point. I want to get Mrs. Tomato to join me in a Frozone cosplay and just replay that scene from The Incredibles when he's yelling at her for his super
Oh
suit.
yeah.
Because her name is
Good.
Honey. Frozone's wife name was Honey. And I love that movie. Those are really the only reasons I want to do it. But yeah, I don't have any like hankering for cosplaying, but I do think it's pretty cool. People can go very far with it and do some impressive stuff. What about you?
Absolutely. No, I have not.
Okay.
I have not, but I have the utmost respect in people who do. Like the creativity and the execution of what you're going to see during this segment is just absolutely incredible. Yeah. I don't have it in me. Like I do the Halloween thing. I don't know. I don't have the time to build out some of the stuff. You're going to see battery operated, like machine operated helmets.
I mean,
like,
you gotta
it's
get
insane.
creative with it. And it's good to get into it now because this is going to be something that lives on for a long time. Cosplay does follow big games. And if Star Citizen does get big, we're going to like in 5 years time, we could see some of the most incredible, setups in the industry when it comes to this stuff. That's one of the beauties of making an entire IP for yourself is that it gives tons of creativity to people who are doing things like machinimas and cosplays and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Dressed to Kill, which is kind of sounds related. In fact, says from high fashion to dynamic function, discover starwear. An exciting new character-focused specializations that let you define your identity and take on the challenges ahead, including the return of a legendary friend from CitizenCon's past. This is such a loaded description.
It is.
Holy crap. There's so many little pieces of information in this. What do you latch on to first when you read this?
Yeah. So, again, I have a heavy military background. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but like filling out your kit before a mission, like every mission you treat differently. The objective, the obstacles at the objective, what you need to do to get off the objective. And that planning is something that I think we're missing in this game. You just go with whatever gear you have. You might be doing a delivery mission, but you're kitted out with a grenade launcher and all this other nonsense. I see mission-oriented specialization where it matters what you're wearing. It matters if you're wearing a medical getup. It matters if you're wearing a light infantry unit, maybe like a quick tactical insertion, or maybe heavy gear if you're going to be there for a long time. I see us having to actually focus on the material of your outfits and how you are kitted for the mission. So I think that is super important coming out of the quote character focused specializations. I think that's what that is talking about. And then the starwear, I actually thought this was part of last year. Maybe you can help me differentiate, but didn't last year they talk about like new clothing and how it interacted with like the wind and how it moved in the environment? Is this just
you're getting your stars mixed up? That's star cloth, my friend.
There we go. It's too many stars. Let's get away from the word star, damn it.
Oh my gosh. But then we wouldn't be star citizens.
That's right. So I think that's it, man. I think I think it is how we get ready for missions, how much it's going to matter. Because like right now, it doesn't necessarily matter what you're wearing.
You make a really good point. And it's something that I kind of forgot about. In CitizenCon 2019, when they were running the mission, they talked about how you might dress in a way that helps you to infiltrate areas because the people would recognize what you were wearing. And this is something that, you'd see it in stealth games like Hitman. I think Splinter Cell did this. A lot of games do things like this, particularly when it comes to stealth. And that could actually be not just an interesting aspect of a game, but a very, very good excuse to get people wearing clothes and not just armor. A lot of people are like, why would I ever wear clothes in this game? When will I ever see my character? I don't need customization. But if you're running 100%. Missions that do require that, whether it's because you're meeting a certain type of NPC and you need to look a certain way, or you're infiltrating a lab and you need to, have the look of a doctor, that I didn't even consider that. That's a very good point. Yeah.
I'm thinking, when you get like a VIP transport mission and you have to be in an 890 jump or something very classy, imagine you have to wear a certain level of clothing. You have to
Yeah.
be in like a tuxedo, and
Yeah.
if you're gonna have to serve food on the 890 jump, you've got to wear a cook uniform. There's I feel like there's certain opportunities here that Star Citizen can really lean into. Hey, we've created this asset in the game. No one's touching it. We're never going to force you.
Is that a lot of people will see that as like an annoyance? Do you think that that's like, how far do you think they should go with something like that? If they're saying like, oh, you can't talk to this person unless you're dressed like this, that could be one of those things that's like, do I really have to fly 20 minutes just to get this outfit to come talk to this person?
I think, and again, I've said this on your show before, but I think Star Citizen needs to find out who it wants to be when it grows up. Well, is it a simulation? Is it one of? I think it needs to identify itself in that way. Because when I think simulation, give it to me, give me the resource management, the engineering, give me the whole thing. Like, make me have to have a co-pilot to fly a freaking Idris. Like, I love the idea of it leaning into simulation. So for me, if I'm about to sit in front of Vaughn and Vaughn expects this high-tiered, professional, looking person, I better not show up naked. Right? If I show up naked, he should turn me away and be like, "Oh, you're not ready for this. Come back when you're ready."
Yeah.
But that's just me though, man. Like I play this game. I can do literally nothing in an hour, but if I just exist in my personal hangar, like I want to just role play the shit out of this game. Excuse my language, but I just want to be. I just want to exist.
Yeah.
And so putting something so realistic in the game like that, for me personally, I'm good with. Now, if the community will accept it, I think that's a different conversation.
I wonder if with this we also get our hands on whatever solution they have been working on for personal inventory. Starware does kind of sound like it is a technology that supports an actual interface that we use for customizing our character besides just like the third-person camera they have now. It would make a lot of sense if they've been using just holdover solutions for that, and now they're going to introduce us with something that is actually what they have in mind for a finalized character customizer. Because we need that for Squadron, right? We absolutely need a way to be able to see our weapons, our attachments, our clothing, all of that stuff in an easy environment. And I know a lot of people would like that to all happen from first person, but I do think whether it's a kiosk or something else, they'll give us a way with like Mobiglass or kiosk, they'll give us a way to do that with the screen. And I'm wondering, is this panel where it's going to happen? And maybe I should clip this because this is this is something I'd like to come back to. This might be one of my hottest takes so far. And
first prediction.
Yeah. I think there is something to that when it comes to character customization, especially the specializations you mentioned. Something else that supports what you said is the monthly reports talking about, the utility focused armor they've been working on. We haven't seen anything about that. They haven't said anything about that. They have gone into absolutely no detail about that besides CitizenCon 2019. So I think that they've got something big to say there too.
Yeah.
The last thing.
This is a good one. Go ahead.
The last thing that I think this really talks about here is dynamic function. Do you think that they could talk about character-based skills during this panel?
Yeah. I mean, 100%. Yeah, I do. We talk about the different roles. Like, not everybody wants to be the main character. Not everybody wants to be the captain on a ship. Some people just want to go heavy into the medical field. But being able to lean into skill trees, I think skill trees is going to be something very interesting.
I think skill trees might be a little bit too far for them. I hope the way they've described it is more like a Grand Theft Auto style, where you do something and it levels up your skill. You don't really unlock a path through a skill tree or something like that. But
yeah, I think what I meant more is exactly what you're saying. Like, not necessarily where you go in and elect points. Like, heaven forbid we ever get into that with Star Citizen. But yeah, leaning into, if I do a lot of medical missions, of course, my reputation goes, high in medical, but it also like gives me like more of a, I guess, choice to lean more heavily into that play loop or that game loop. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that gives us a chance to really lean into that.
We'll have to see. That's going to be a divisive one. I'm sure in the comments, you guys let me know what you think of that, because I know there's a lot of opinions about that.
Yeah.
Next panel after this is Beyond Pyro, which might be one of the most happy panels for people just to hear. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not about Pyro. It is whatever is not Pyro, right? It's after Pyro, and we were talking about this earlier as this might be the moment where they start to include Pyro as just part of the game that gets discussed, and whatever comes after it. It reads, "To the fantastic reaches beyond Stanton and Pyro, join us as we explore the exciting new frontiers of Star Citizen's persistent universe." The use of plural frontiers feels a little bit possibly misleading, but what do you think they're pointing to here?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had a dev come out last week and say frontiers as in like the frontiers within Pyro, like to your point about it being misleading. But yeah, I mean, I think they've packaged Stanton and Pyro. We've gone heavy. I mean, almost every Inside Star Citizen this entire year has been about Pyro. So I think we've seen enough of Pyro. So I think this is where they really rip that Band-Aid off and say, all right, you've seen everything in Pyro. You are up to date on where we're at, but check this out. And I think this is where they just awe everybody, whether it's Nyx, whether it's 2, 3, 4 systems, whether it's 100 systems and how they're going to get there, maybe the roadmap or the path forward. But I think absolutely they're going to introduce tinfoil hat time. They're going to introduce Nyx. They're going to introduce their next project and really talk about that road to get there. The biggest hurdle they've ever had to get over is Pyro. Once Pyro is launched, it's at that point just emulation or replication. Like, how do you get into Nyx? How do you get into Terra and Sol? So I think this is going to be huge. I don't think they're going to go all 100, but I think we're going to get more than just one. I think it's going to be Nyx and maybe a second or a third.
Yeah, I think we'll see a couple of systems here past Pyro that are at different stages. So I do think that what they posted on Twitter the other day with the frontiers was probably just talking about Pyro and considering that the different areas in Pyro can be considered different frontiers. But here, I do kind of think they're referring to frontiers as different systems. And I could see them doing, okay, here's Nyx in terms of gameplay, right? They can very easily, like, we have Nyx. We have Levski. They could easily just load up Levski and be like, here are all the changes we've made to it. Walk around it a little bit. It's already in game. And that might not be that the whole of Nyx is ready, but it's still a different way to show a system besides just concept art. Then they could do like, okay, so here is the concept art for Pyro, which I think is what we saw in 2021. Or no, sorry, not Pyro, Terra. Because we saw that for Pyro in 2021, remember? So it was about a 3-year turnover from, not even 3 years. They were really showing us Pyro stuff within the next year or two after that. So like we could see some concept art for Terra that they have planned out for a couple years from now. I don't think something like Terra is coming anytime soon, or even Magnus really. But we could still see what they have planned for that. The same goes for Odin, which has been built out quite a bit for Squadron 42. It's not ready for the PU, but again, in-game assets that they could show off to show, here is the development we're doing for other star systems. This is how reputation will be changed there. This is how the UEE acts differently there. These are some of the factions that you might find there. And here are some of the reasons. I think one of the biggest things they need to show people is a lot of people say, okay, what's a new star system than just a different colored Stanton? Why would I care about going there? What's the difference? And Incomes talks about economy and law and things like that that actually make it different, make you want to possibly go there. What would be the system you want to see most?
I mean, I'm basic here. Nyx, like all the talk about Nyx, the background of Nyx. Like honestly, I'm leaning towards that. If they're going to show actual gameplay footage, put me in Nyx. I actually agree with you. I agree with you that there's going to be different reveals of different stages of the planets or of the systems, and so I think we're going to see something like on planet side in Nyx. I think that'll be amazing. Really, like a shocker to everybody. But then I think we're going to get into like, what's that next system? And they're going to probably show us maybe the system look, like where the planet orientation is, maybe the color of the sun, right? The impact, but then show us the next 20, but in a roadmap, right? So you've seen Nyx, you've seen, I don't know, Terra, I'm throwing it out there, but you've seen Nyx, you've seen Terra. Now here's the roadmap for the next 10. within the next 10 years. I don't know, say 10 years. But like, here's our vision. I think that is what's important to me coming out of CitizenCon is show us your vision. Because I don't think there's a lot of clarity. You and I can surmise all day long. We could talk about podcasts all day long, but it'd be great for them to say, look, in the next 10 years, our goal is to get 20 systems out. Here's Nick's in the next 2 or 3 years. And in the next 7 years, here's how we're going to outline everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do here and what they specifically talk about.
Could be anything.
Yeah, and there have been a couple little signs that the star map is changing to accommodate the view of multiple star systems. So I'm sure that'll be a place where they talk about that as well.
Yeah.
Redacted. What is redacted, Sulyce?
Well, redacted as a word is defined, but man, I think this is all things Squadron 42. I think, I don't know. You've heard me say it. If you've listened to Beyond the Verse podcast, I've been saying this for like a year now. I think the theme of this CitizenCon aesthetically, we're inside of a Bengal. It's going to be Squadron 42. It's either a play test. I think this might actually be a play test for those physically at the site. Quite honestly, I do think you're going to be able to walk around maybe the Bengal or something. But you're going to be in Squadron 42, in my opinion. But I think this, I mean, how long is that? Let me alt tab real quick. Is that 3 hours?
I think it's probably going to be around 2 hours because the main event ends at 7:30 and this panel starts at 5:30. And then the venue closes at 9.
At 9. So yeah, I mean, I think this is Squadron 42, whether it starts out in the presentation room about here's the release date, here's, we're going to see this in March, and maybe then the venue closes at 9 p.m. to your point. Maybe then you actually get to walk out, sit down in front of a computer and play the play test of Squadron 42. But it has to be Squadron 42. Like we talked about the polishing phase last CitizenCon, that only takes 8 to 12 months. Well, here we are 12 months later. It has to be Squadron 42. What are your thoughts?
Oh yeah, no, it's Squadron. It is for sure Squadron. This is likely either the preparation or the beginning for their marketing campaign for Squadron 42. I wouldn't be surprised if they had somebody who's in the game out there on stage just for a little bit of extra hype, just to get a little bit of extra buzz from the community outside of Star Citizen. And I fully expect them to do some kind of a demo, whether it is a rerun of the vertical slice from 2017, which I think would be a very good idea to give such a deep contrast as to where they've gone with the direction of the game, how they've actually, like when they did that vertical slice, they didn't even have scanning gameplay. Like there was a part where they had to just cheese it and be like, oh, I'm going to scan these people and see who they are. Okay, scan them. It looks like they're these people. And you're like, there's no gameplay for that, really. So I think being able to show how complete the actual game is compared to what they showed then would be great. But they could also just do like a chapter 1 kind of overview. Maybe that was in chapter 1. I don't even know. But I think the reason we've been seeing so much polish on chapter 1 over this last year and specific focus on it in the monthly reports is because they want to be able to show that right now at its best. And I think this is going to be one of the most important couple of hours of Star Citizen's history, because whatever comes out of this is going to be likely more popularly shared than anything from CitizenCon last year. And we saw what CitizenCon last year did for Star Citizen that no other show before that has done. This is just going to top that. And I think it's going to be this panel that does it. So they need to make sure that this is good, because Squadron needs to have a good launch, in my opinion.
That's it. Nail on the head. Yeah, I've nothing to add to that other than, I guess my tinfoil hat is like, this will be you waking up in bed and you getting up and getting on your clothes from your locker and walking around, the freaking ship. Man, it's going to be no actual gameplay. Like I truly don't think it's going to be gameplay, but I think you're going to be able to walk around and see what the universe feels like, in my opinion. Like, you
mean for the demo that people could play?
For the demo, correct, 100%. Yeah, but I do think like a vertical slice or like what they're going to show for like IGN reviews and what the major content creators are going to pick up. There's got to be this groundbreaking video that they're going to show. That this is Squadron 42. Boom, release date March 2025.
This needs to be their E3 presentation of like what games would do in order to sell what they were making. This is likely And it's really funny to think about this. This is probably where most games would be doing their big reveal. As opposed to Squadron has been in people's minds for 10 plus years. This is where traditionally Squadron would finally get shown off if this were just a normal way a game was made. And it's funny to think of how much time has gone that's happened. Just like, even when there are delays, a lot of games get delayed in the background, right? That nobody ever hears about. And then you finally, you know, the name is there, you know it exists, you know what it's about. But then this moment comes and you really get to see the game actually be played. And you're like, oh, okay, now I get it. But we've been living with that for a long time. Do you think
so? One more tinfoil hat. I think we need to all watch Mark Hamill's social media. I think Mark Hamill.
I was going to ask you, do you think they'll be doing stuff outside of CitizenCon for this? Do you think they'll do any exclusives with any journalistic companies or hand out hands-on reviews or anything or previews?
See, I don't know about that piece. Like, I don't know, personal opinions, obviously. I don't know if they're ready for like IGN or some sort of, you know, massive publication. I think they're at the point now where they could lean heavily on like their paid actors, like Mark Hamill.
True.
Like I would
Henry Cavill.
I would leverage them so hard because like I think, heck, even have Mark Hamill show up, have him walk across the stage and introduce Squadron 42, right? I would go heavy on who currently exists. And then I would prioritize content creators. I would make like reviews the last effort, in my personal opinion. I think those are dead. And again, this is probably controversial, but I think IGN reviews are dead. I don't really pay attention to them anymore. But if you leverage, you know, these high volume or high velocity content creators, the actors, the paid actors, you can get a social media push or a marketing push just by this redacted section alone. You could sell more than, you know, a mainstream publication.
Who do you think, if they had to include one more actor, and I know there's a lot of disagreements about how much actors should be in these things because of the high price tag and all that stuff, who do you think would be one more actor that would boost the hype just ridiculously over who's already in this?
Goldman?
Yeah, that would,
yeah, I mean, like we know, you said Henry Cavill, but like I think somebody who's, you know, heavily into the gaming world and represents the gaming world very well. But I mean, you just need, and this is so insulting to a lot of people, but you just need Mark Hamill. I mean, you need Luke
Mark
Skywalker.
Hamill really does it. Yeah,
that's it. I mean, that's all you truly need.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think Keanu Reeves would be the one person that could probably bring it up to another. And that would be just so ridiculous. But he's probably far too expensive at this point.
Maybe, yeah. But his work with Cyberpunk was amazing, obviously. Yeah. But that dude's as much of a gamer as any of us. But having him walk out on stage, like, how hilarious would that be?
That would be amazing. Very funny. Yeah, that would be so funny if they replicated what he did with Cyberpunk 2, where he just goes and stands out there. But yeah, right. I think that'd be a bit much. I think they've done enough with the very, very diverse and skilled and talented cast that. Like you said, they could definitely leverage for marketing along with whatever they do during this couple hours that they have at the end of the venue. And I do think you have a good point there that, you know, you run this until the end of the event, you end it at 7:30, and that gives a lot of people, I think though, if there's a demo, you'll be able to play it before then. But kind of like what they did last year at the end of that first day, they were like, okay, you got to see, you know, what we're doing with Pyro. Let us remind you there is a playable demo out there you can go try. So then you'd have maybe the event ends at 7:30 and then you get like an hour and a half to get in line to try out the demo if there is one afterwards. And I think that's probably how it goes. So we're on to our intermission, folks. If you want to take a second to we're going to jump into day 2 here, which won't be as long, but is definitely filled with a lot of goodness. Okay, intermission's done. Let's get to it. Base building. We're kicking off.
I was wondering what you were doing with this.
we're kicking off day 2 with base building. And this, for a lot of people, is probably the most interesting panel. This is one. Base building is one of those things that is certified feature creep in this game. No holds. This is a concept that couldn't have been possible until they made the planetary tech that they did in 2015 and wasn't really brought up until I think the announcement of the Pioneer in 2017 or maybe 2018. But since then, since 2017, 2018, base building has been this sort of nebulous idea that everybody knew was going to be really interesting, but nobody knew how it was really going to work until CitizenCon last year, where it was sort of brought back into the conversation and production started this year. What do you think, with all of that sort of preamble, this will include?
God bless, man. I don't know. Let me first say that this is it for me. Like I care less. Not that I couldn't care less. I care less about more pyros and more nixes and more planets. For me, my org, we are most interested in existing and living planet side in bases. So this is it. Day 2. I am glued to my computer and I'm watching this. It's got to at least meet the bar of like a No Man's Sky base building, maybe with an Elder Scrolls Online customization. It's got to at least match that. So I would love to see it demoed where, okay, here's some structures that you can build, but here's what the interior of those look like and how things can snap or grid lock into place. Like we got to see a lot of more of those interactions as well. But I think you brought up the frontier. And for me, like that's my $1 million question. It's an 8 kilometer by 8 kilometer square that you get to build your base on if you have a frontier. Mm-hmm. What does that look like? If I have 2,000 in a server and we all rush to the same location, is it a lottery system? Like how's that going to work? So I think for me, to answer your question, it's not only the aesthetics, it's not only the buildings and how does the actual base building like look and interact, but I also think it's the logistics of it. I think they're going to get into, okay, it's a great concept, but here's how it's going to work. Here's maybe the first iteration, the second iteration. They wrapped up CitizenCon last year by talking about how to defend, your land grab, how to, if you pay a certain amount, you're going to get protection or less protection. So I think they're going to get more into the logistics, more into the frontier, quite honestly, and what that means for how to grab that land and how to control that land. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you go further into that because we haven't heard anything since last CitizenCon. None of it. So we don't know what their next steps are.
I think that the teaser video they put out back in like August gives some idea of what we might get, which was just like a very simple building with some suit lockers and maybe a garage or something for a ground vehicle. I do think, though, that you are right about the logistics of this and also how this factors into the economic situation in the game, how you do need to source materials. The materials you source, whether they are from the local population and area or from farther away, could cost more, could take longer, things like that. I don't think we'll get into like resource extraction just yet. I think that's still further down the line. This does feel like, though, at the very least, you can make a settlement where you're safe to log on and off from, where you're safe to maybe start off from on the day and have your ship around. And then, there's some consideration to be had between high security and low security settlements. High security being something maybe in Terra or maybe in a planet on Stanton that's near a city. Low security being like in the Pyro system on moons, maybe on a certain area of Yella or another moon in Stanton, where sure, you can easily get started with base building, but you don't have protection and that's a little dangerous. They're going to have to be careful about how they bring this into the game so that everybody has a chance, even if you're wanting high security or low security or medium security. And there's a lot to talk about. There is a ton to talk about. And what I'm really hoping is that we see something gameplay related today, this year. Because last year was conceptual, it was design, it was here's our plans. We've seen that they've had production time on it now over the majority of the last year. So we should be seeing something that's actually in engine at this point.
So that's what you think you'll see. What would be the one thing that you hope to see? Like what is you in the garden? Like what do y'all want to see come out of this conversation? And I can go first if you want me to, but I'm curious, like what's your desire coming out of that?
Well, definitely the resource extraction. I think that's the most interesting part of base building, is because that has ramifications for exploration, for data running, for mining, for salvaging, for transportation. First, you got to start with somebody surveying a planet, right? Scanning it, finding out where the resource pools are. Then you got to figure out, okay, are we going to sell that data to a space station for the public domain? Are we going to keep that for ourselves in our org? If we do, how are we going to act on it? Are we going to sit on it? Are we going to wait with that? Or are we going to use it right now? If we're using it right now, okay, we need to get a group together that can go out there and set up a base building operation. We need to get a cargo hauling situation that can supply them with the resources needed for that base. We need somebody who can protect this land while it's being built. We need people who are also, looking in the nearby area, continue exploration, find out what we can exploit having a base in this location. And then once the base is actually built, then you're starting to actually extract those resources, packaging them up into different types of ships. Where are we going to sell this stuff? Is it going to be in a different system where we get more money, or a local area where we can do it fast but maybe get cheaper profits? Like, so many parts of this game come together when we start to get resource deposits inside of planets that we can exploit. And that's the most exciting thing to me. That and crafting, which is another thing that they've mentioned here. This is the fundamentals of crafting and base building. And we know that crafting is going to rest or rely on physicalized recipes, which we can then trade, sell, loot, barter for, and capture from other people, much like they do in Eve. So those are the two things for me, the crafting and the resource management.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'll add one more to that. So first off, yeah, I think the execution of all of that is very attractive for org play. Like for me, org play wise, like what does it mean for me to have an 8 kilometer by 8 kilometer and my buddy and the whole org also attaching their bases onto my property? Like having a whole planet side dedicated to soul provision or to the garden. Like what does the interaction look like? Like how does it all tie in together?
Yeah.
Can you connect the systems together, or the systems? Can you connect the bases together to truly have an org headquarters? I'll speak for myself. I fantasize about that with my org all the time, because again, it's that existing in the game that I want to lean heavy into that. So I think the resource management, all that, everything you just said, super awesome execution. But then like adding to the existing in that base system or in that org headquarters, I think that would be a badass thing to see, or at least their vision for it.
Making it your own, and in a place where you can log on and you find like 15 other people just roaming around doing their own things every time. Yeah. One more thing I forgot to mention there is farming. That's a huge part of our org, being the garden. Like, we want to be one of the main suppliers of agricultural and we'll call it medicinal needs in the Magnus Triangle. So we are like learning how you can have different types of plants, how you can refine those plants into different types of goods, whether they be, your normal medicine, like your medipens, whether they be things like widow or some of the other drugs in the game, how you can then ship those off, what the complications around that are. That is also, I think, a very interesting part of the game. The first introduction I had to DayZ was watching one of my favorite creators in that space, JLK, run a cartel, and just seeing the open abilities that game provided for them to be able to do that and protect their shipments and their flow and decide where they were going to sell and make it into this whole long-term conflict for a group of players was inspiring in how could we do that on the space arena. Yeah. So, it's fun to ideate. It's fun to think about that. Yeah. Certainly fun to think about it. We'll see if they give us the ability to do it, or how far off that even is. But it's going to be an exciting panel for a lot of people, I think. Yeah, and that's how I was going to sum this up too. It's like no one freaking knows. I mean, they stayed very broad. I think the next section down is like what the tools and resources to do it. Yeah. No one knows, but I think a demonstration, if at least half of what you and I just discussed, that would be super exciting, and I think would generate a lot of hype. For sure. Agreed. Okay. Captains of Industry is the next panel. This is, like you said, it's a little bit related to base building, but it's also sort of just their ship talk panel for the year. Mm-hmm. They say, uncover the ships and ground vehicles that will serve as your primary tools for base building in the verse, revisit a classic, and more. What do you get from that description?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've read this description. I'm like, okay, the Pioneer. But
Yeah.
that's but I was also reading it in the context of base building. So the 10 o'clock is crafting your home. The 11:15 captains of those tools of
Right.
building in the verse.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't even think about crafting until you said something about it just now, a couple minutes ago. So I think this might actually get into, okay, beyond just refining, material or, at a refinery. Like, what does the rest of that crafting look like? And so I think, to recap everything you literally just said about your org and what y'all are looking to do with medicinal properties, um, I think this is it. I think this is the future of crafting, what you can build, how you can ship it, right? So uncover ships and ground vehicles that will serve. So I think we'll talk about the Pioneer. I think they might introduce, this might be the time for them to introduce like maybe a new ship that serves this purpose, but it's also only 45 minutes. It's one of the shorter, it's one of the
Yeah.
shorter segments. So I don't think it's, maybe not a brand new ship, because I think they would need more time. I think this is crafting. I think this is the tools for base building. It literally says tools for base building. But beyond that, probably crafting, maybe a few other different things, but not at 45 minutes.
I think we might get some new stuff. I think they've
I hope
got
so.
an Argo vehicle planned of some sort, which
Yeah.
could be a small crafting ship. I think they also might take this opportunity to just sort of introduce the idea of what crafting in ships looks like. So now they've been building it out a little bit more on the Vulture.
Mm. Yeah.
Will they stick to something like that? Will the Vulture continue to be able to craft? Will it be something that most ships can do with some kind of add-on? Or will this be something that we need to get specific ships or vehicles for? I think you're right on about the Pioneer. That seems like it would be revisit a classic, just makes sense for something like the
Yep.
Pioneer. And then I'm guessing whatever the large vehicle we saw last year looked like, it was almost like a Spartan sized vehicle, maybe a little bit bigger. And the Galaxy will be two things that are discussed. So
Didn't even think about the Galaxy, but yeah, good point.
it does seem like it's very much base building focused, but then they say and more at the end, and maybe that just includes an update to ships in general.
Yeah. It probably ties into resource management, probably ties into, just like you said, in general, like something that is going to be fundamental, for some ships. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right, to close out our last panel, and likely besides the Squadron 42 one, the most important, the Stars My Destination, Star Citizen 1.0, it reads, PvE, PvP, non-combat, what type of game is Star Citizen? It's a lot of people have been asking that. If you want answers, join us as we outline a high-level overview of Star Citizen 1.0 and what our intentions are for our epic shared universe. How disappointing do you think this panel is going to be for a lot of people?
Such an interesting thing to end CitizenCon with. I think everybody leaves disappointed, but not. I want to tailor my response, not as in like they're angry with CIG and it creates some drama or whatever. But I think everybody has what they want out of Star Citizen. Like right now, if you're listening or watching this podcast, you know how you want 1.0 to look and feel, and they're about to ruin it for you. They're going to say, here's the vision. Here's what we're actually going to be doing. Here's the pathway to 1.0. Here's the minimum viable product to get 1.0 off the road, or off to the roads. And I think people leave this like maybe not underwhelmed, but maybe disappointed that their version of Star Citizen as an end state is not happening. Like, just one example. They launch 1.0 with 3 systems, and every other system is a patch, or is a DLC after that.
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine?
Oh my God, that'd be awful.
Can you imagine though, like that? But that's a possibility. Like, I'm not saying they are, but like they could tell us something in those general guidelines, in that general direction, and imagine the overwhelming response to that. So it's amazing that this is like the last segment before they release everybody to go home. It's going to be very interesting on what they are willing to release. Here's the last thing, and I'll end with this piece. They have to, 100%, they have to clearly define what their minimum viable product is. They have to, because right now it's this cloud of like, who knows where we're going? Who know they've been saying 1.0 in monthly reports and in Insight Star Citizens all year long, but what does that mean? So they have to say that these tech pillars and these a certain number of systems and function, like, this is what it's going to take to get Star Citizen 1.0 to publish, to go live. I don't think they can afford many more years of just saying, well, it'll happen when it happens. It's an early access. An early access game to what? Like, we don't know what we're playing early access to. So
Yeah.
they've got to hit a home run in this segment, and they need to be very clear, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing that they need to do here is make sure people understand what they're getting into. So many people have just really just see that there is a space game that is deemed as to be eventually an MMO. It takes place in first person. It's got multiple planets and star systems and space stations, and you get to live inside of it and do what you want. But like, the details are so lost in the wind. There's no real central place where people can go and find out what the heck this game is going to be. And this, I think, is the first time that they're actually laying it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there is going to be some disappointment, whether it's from the maybe lack of content that's going to be in 1.0 compared to the things that we know are supposed to be in this game, the amount of stuff that's going to come after that, the direction that the game is going in. Some people don't like survival aspects when you can't have a space game with escape pods and not have survival elements. There's no point in escape pods if there's no challenge or benefit of survival, then you just kill yourself every time your ship's about to be disabled. So I think survival elements are one of those things. Things like the cargo refactor is something that a lot of people weren't expecting. The death mechanics in this game is something a lot of people don't really know or care to learn too much about until it starts to affect us. How can players, will we be able to do our agent smithing? Right? Can you actually load into another NPC in a different star system to help your friend to do something instead of having to travel 30 minutes to get there? Those kinds of small details, or even kind of large details, are very important for people understanding whether or not this is the game for them in the future. And so laying that kind of stuff out is very important during this panel.
Do you think we'll finally get a decision made on insurance? I don't know. They're still toting lifetime insurance, 120-month insurance. Like, I think, like, even those things need to get worked out. You talk about the death of a spaceman, right? Like you talk about the death, but like, there's some pretty easy low-hanging fruit here where I think they could land the plane on, no pun intended, on like insurance. Like, help us understand that even.
I think so. I think this is the place where they need to say stuff about that. Yeah. Because not only is that important to our money sinks, to helping us understand why we need to know why we want to make money in this game.
Yes.
A lot of people think the only reason to make money in this game, or that will ever be, is to buy ships and components. And it's not the case. You gotta pay insurance on your weapons, on your components, on your ships, on your apartments, your habs, the bases you build. You've got to pay hangar fees if you're getting more personal hangars in different locations and different star systems and stuff. You've got to pay for I don't know, the cow tax on the milk that you buy at the store, whatever it is. Like, they need to start to tell people, here's why the economy is going to exist, here's how it's going to look, and here's how you're going to factor into it, so that people know why the heck they're even doing the jobs they're doing besides just having some fun. Yeah. So yeah, insurance definitely falls there. And that also leads us to monetization. I honestly don't know if they will whip that out for this conversation. I think it would be a good idea for them to at least start to talk about it, to help people understand, hey, we're not going to solely rely on selling ships forever. We're going to start monetizing more heavily the subscriptions that we already offer. Not to say a subscription to play, everybody. It's an optional subscription, but this is this is where the game could go, and they need to make their money. So cosmetics, optional subscriptions, whatever it might be, that might also be part of this conversation. But again, being the last part of CitizenCon, it would not be good to end everything on monetization. So maybe like do that in the beginning and then talk about the good stuff towards the end.
See, that's why this baffles me that this is the last thing, because I mean, again, depending on what they do talk about, this is the last taste in everyone's mouth when they leave CitizenCon, right? So even if you're disappointed about one of the things, like you're leaving like, damn, that kind of sucks. I don't know. It feels deflating.
Yeah.
But they've got, I agree with everything you just said. They've got to land the plane on a lot of these basic, like monetization, whether you're into that conversation or not. Every game in 2024 and beyond needs to battle with how they're going to pay for live services. How do you pay for live services? You can't just go off of pledge store sales on ships. Those are finite. So there's got to be some sort of monetization. They're going to have to come out and say what that is. Maybe not for this panel, but we need to know as gamers, like, is it a free to play game and it's based off of pledge store buys? That sucks. I'm never a fan of those. I don't know. Tough.
Yeah, no, it's good that they're having this panel, but it's not an easy conversation to have. And I don't want to say it's surprising that they're doing it at CitizenCon. I think this is the place where it would make the biggest difference, but this is going to be a bit of a rough time, I think. And as much hype and as much fun as it's going to be to talk about what this actual finished game is going to be, like the new target, the big sort of, oh, we're headed in this direction. If they're being realistic, which with the road to release in 2018, maybe they weren't as realistic as they should have been. But that was the last time they did this, really, was 2018 road to release. They set the stage that ended with server meshing, which we're now at it. So they're doing it again. And if they are being realistic, I think this is going to be a relatively up and down kind of conversation to have. And I'm surprised that they're doing it at CitizenCon and last at CitizenCon. But we'll see. Maybe it ends with a big announcement. God, I hope it's not a date. I really freaking hope it's not a date. The only date we should be getting during this CitizenCon is a Squadron 42 release window.
Dude, can you imagine? And Star Citizen 1.0, we're slated for 2028. Oh my God.
I don't care what they would say. Like, I don't care if it's 2028, 2026, 2042. Like, don't put a date on it. Just don't.
Come on, guys.
We know he's going to come out. He's going to, I'm not going to say any dates, everybody. And then he's going to say a date, give a timeline of some sort, whatever. Either way, that is all of the panels. After that, we have the Atmo Esports event, which will be running and is on the official schedule. They've been doing a lot to team up alongside CIG and make something really great out of this. Are you going to be tuning in for that?
I will. Yeah, and I'm still trying to figure out if I'm waking up at 3 a.m. To watch everything live. But at this point, I probably will be. But yeah, I'll be watching the whole thing. It's always exciting to watch everybody get in game and do the competitive nature of Star Citizen. So I'll be there for it. But
it's rough for Americans when we're used to so much stuff happening on our timeline. It's part of why we ended up just staying over here in Turkey until the end of that. And like, now we're dealing with like a Discord ban and everything. But it works a lot better time wise to watch it from here. Before we head out, I do want to get your opinion on just the last detail about this, which is a lot of players are at this stage of thinking last year's CitizenCon features have not all released. Should we have any faith in this CitizenCon with anything they say? Like, is it worth listening to if they're not going to do it all in the next year?
I mean, yes, but this is my approach to this game is center and leaning to the White Knight side of things. So it's just my life is happier when I just believe them. Like I don't know, you know what I mean? Like if they say
sound like the citizens slipping into a dictatorship. Like just believe them.
It's whatever. No. So I think I don't know. Whatever they promise us. Okay, first off, let's talk about this year very quickly. They came pretty damn close to releasing everything, like close for CIG standards. Now, did Pyro come out over the
standards?
Yeah. I clarified for CIG standards. Like, I don't know. It's they are so close. That tech preview of the 2,000 head count, though choppy, like they are so close to at least static server meshing. So okay, whatever they tell me going into this CitizenCon, I'm viewing through that lens. I have seen it. I have played in server meshing. I've experienced the tech piece. So if they tell me that, next year base building will be in the game, I'm probably going to think about that through the lens of Pyro being out in the summer. Like maybe, like, it's such a hard question to end on, Keenan. Like it depends on how,
just like Star Citizen 1.0 is hard to end on.
yeah. It depends on what kind of gamer you are. For me, I'll believe them. If they tell me that, Squadron 42 is coming out in, Q2 of next year, cool. I'll buy the t-shirt. I'll make a podcast about it. Like, I'll be happy about it. But like, I don't know. You look at the last 12 years and you can be doubtful. You can totally be doubtful. But then rewind the last hour and a half that you and I have been talking. This year has felt different. It has felt different. Of all 12 years of their existence, the communication is getting better. Their publication, their marketing efforts, their reports, their after action reviews, everything that they've been doing this year has shown progress and improvement. And so I hope they build upon that. And with that faith, I can probably lean heavily into believing what they say in CitizenCon. I don't know. I hope that answers your question, but I think it just depends.
No, I think it does. And I think the most important thing people should remember is that the things that they say are not promises. It's easy to take them as promises. They're simply not. They're what they hope they can do. And a lot of times things shift around. I'm not in any way excusing the fact that 4.0 didn't come out this summer. That was ridiculously off base. And even in like July, we were being told that it wasn't going to be end of year. Like all of that kind of stuff, they need to just stop saying things like that. That stuff is irresponsible. And even if it's not accurate, like even if it's not a promise, it's still setting expectations incorrectly. I think CitizenCon should act as an event that shows the direction they're going in, not based on timelines or anything like that, but rather just what is being worked on in a big way that's easy to get all that information in one place rather than looking at every monthly report and every ISC and every SCL. This makes it easy for somebody to just understand what's going on. And that's why when I go into this, I'm not going to expect, like, if there is a date, I'm going to ignore it. I'll say it in my content, sure, and I'll let people know, don't really trust the dates, but this is what they said. But it's a lot easier to judge if you are watching all of that stuff, monthly reports and everything. You can kind of tell what the progress towards this stuff is. We can tell that 4.0 is actually looking like it'll come in the next several months. And that only counts for so much of the stuff they talk about. So, some of it, I think, you can trust will come in the next year. A lot of it, I would say, no, you can't. So overall, just kind of take it all with a grain of salt. Just use it as what they're doing and where they're going and not necessarily what they're going to achieve.
Yeah. In my conclusion, pay attention to Squadron 42 at CitizenCon and just accept that Star Citizen will happen when it happens.
Yeah.
But I think, we've seen Squadron 42 go through polishing. It's through polishing. So all that needs to happen now is the marketing and PR push. So I would hold CIG responsible for everything they say about Squadron 42. But for Star Citizen,
They better not release a freaking buggy Squadron 42. Holy crap.
They can't.
Like, it better be squeaky clean. I mean, obviously there's going to be some bugs, but it's got to be a good release.
100% agree.
All right, man. Thank you so much for joining me for this. I know it's early for you and you've got a long day ahead of you, so I really appreciate you sitting down with me for one of the longest launch sequence episodes to get through all these details. Before we go, can you let the folks know where they can find your own beautiful podcast?
Well, I appreciate this. Always a pleasure. I don't know how many of these we've done together, so I appreciate every time that you've had me on. Yeah, I host the Beyond the Verse Star Citizen podcast. You can see all my socials at /BTV_cast, or the YouTube channel is /@BTV_cast. But we do this every week. We go through the patch notes and monthly reports and go through the details. So if this interests you and you want to hear it on a weekly basis and don't have the time to read it yourself, that's what I do. That's my brand.
It helps because there's a lot of reading to do, especially in the next couple of months. There's going to be a lot to go over. Best of luck with you, or to you, on your summaries. But I guess we'll be doing one of the summaries, or at least one of the last final talks before it all happens on your own podcast. So looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing you again next week. Have a wonderful weekend.
You as well. Thanks, brother.
And to everybody else, thank you for watching or listening. You can always support us if you'd like to help make this stuff possible. Our Patreon and YouTube and Twitch supporters all get to join us live for this. They're sitting in the chat right now, leaving comments and saying all their things, their funny comments. And if you want to get more of this kind of content, I publish YouTube videos every day, almost of every week, whether it's on Space Tomato 2, Space Tomato, or Space Tomato Plays, gameplay, long talks, and opinion pieces, whatever you'd like. Happy to provide. Thanks again, everybody, for coming and checking this one out, and I'll see you all next week after CitizenCon. Bye-bye.